You're listening to Money FM 89.3. I'm Chua Tian Tian with your market view. Now, we've talked in depth on the show about private equity and venture capital investing, but what about corporate venture and how bigger players are positioning themselves for the future? Now, our guest for today is from Supply Chain Angels, the corporate venture arm of Singapore's largest homegrown supply chain solutions company. Now, co-invested by the National Research Foundation under the Early Stage Venture Funding Scheme 3, SC Venture invests in startups that are synergistic and complementary to YCH Group's supply chain and logistic business with the aim of nurturing innovative disruptors. And we want to find out what they're up to and which startups they are setting their sights on for the new year. Let's speak to Isaac Chua, Head of Investment at Supply Chain Angels and Head of Corporate Investment at YCH Group. Hi, Isaac. Welcome to the show.
Hello, hi Tian Tian. Thanks for inviting me to this session. Glad to be here. So maybe an introduction on myself. I head up the investment team for YCH Group, which includes managing Supply Chain Angels. I also look after other parts of corporate investments such as M&A and real estate investments. So a bit on Supply Chain Angels. This entity is a CVC of YCH Group, which is one of the largest privately held logistic player in Asia, with more than 5,000 over employees. So YCH Group does end-to-end supply chain management for top global brands and MNCs in this region. Yeah, so Supply Chain Angels started in 2017 with a view to collaborate and invest in startup in the region. So the investment mandate is we invest in Singapore startups. We are sector agnostic, but the company that we invest in must have some technology angle, and we prefer to do Singapore deals, companies in the early stage, pre-Series A and Series A round. Ideally, the companies that we invest in need to show some sort of track record and revenue. And in terms of revenue, 1 to 5 million is a sweet spot for us. So the ticket size can range from a few 100,000 all the way to 4 million during the initial funding stage. Yeah.
Right. I'd like to, before we talk about the investment mandate, let's briefly touch on the co-investment by National Research Foundation into Supply Chain Angels itself. Where does the NRF fit in the bigger scheme of things?
So NRF actually awarded the venture capital fund to 4 local large enterprises. This is under the installment of the ESVF scheme. So on a per fund basis, they have committed 10 million on a matching scheme basis to invest in technology startup in Singapore. So as an incentive, CVC like Supply Chain Angels are given an option to buy out NRF stake in this investment, which kind of de-risk our investments as compared to if we were to invest in this startup alone. And we know that ESVF is an initiative under the National Framework for Innovation and Enterprises, which is of a national program to grow innovation and entrepreneurship in Singapore. It is very clear that NRF's objective is to invest in innovative local tech startup and also to promote the startup ecosystem in Singapore. So the co-investment scheme actually encourages supply chain angels or other, large local enterprises to engage in corporate venturing to source for innovative technology and business model as part of the overall corporate strategy, and in the process, improve innovative capacity.
Right. Well, so, okay, now off to what Supply Chain Angels is investing, right? Your investment mandate, as you mentioned earlier, is to invest in early stage companies less than 5 years from date of incorporation, annual value of no more than 5 million Sing dollars. What are the reasons behind the move, and what is your typical investment horizon, if there's any, to begin with?
Okay, so when we talk about all this kind of quantitative measure, this is largely due to our investment mandate, which is to invest in early stage companies. And we know that the definition for early stage companies can be quite loosely defined. Hence, together with our co-investment partner NRF, we sort of have some quantitative measurements on how we define early stage companies. And some of these measurements that we use can be the number of years of incorporation, as well as revenue numbers. And the stage of companies that we invest in, like I mentioned earlier, is usually in the pre-series A and series A. Companies that are incorporated more than 5 years or have revenue of more than 5 million are typically in the later stage of the fundraise series. But however, these two requirements, they are not cast in stone, and we do decide on a deal by deal basis, and there are of course exceptions to the rules as well. And if you look at our portfolio, we have done investments that generate more than 5 million revenue because their revenue growth traction is very strong due to their unique product and viable business model. Having said that, we do follow up on like some of these investments after their initial fundraise. These can be in Series B and Series C. And for supply chain angels, we don't really have a fixed investment horizon. But
Right.
with NRF, we do agree that this fund is a 10-year fund.
So, okay, let's talk about the startup selection process, Isaac. Where does the
Yep.
or how does this what does the selection process look like actually? What kind of synergies are you looking out for in startups that are complementary to your bigger business, YCH Group, right? Supply chain business.
Yep. So there are a few questions, to this part. So maybe I will touch on the selection process. So whenever we meet potential investee company, we definitely need to understand their product, their technology, and the problems that they propose to solve. If the identified market problem is real and the proposed technology solution is creative, disruptive, and scalable, then the conversation can get more interesting. And the founders, they play a very important role. Their vision, relevant background, and skill sets will also be considered. So usually we enter into a proof of concept to test the viability of their technology and their product. And in YCH Group, we do have other resources as well. So we seek inputs from other departments and get their feedback from our technology arm, Y3 Technologies, on the technical aspect of things. Yeah, and the few areas that we invest in, can be companies in the fintech sector or logistic tech sector as well. So in the fintech area, we do look at companies that are in the group, the cross-border payment or supply chain financing segment as well. And for the enlarged group, we do have a vision to build the logistics superhighway, which is to integrate the physical flow, the information, and the financial flow. So YCH as an operating entity, we are already managing the physical flow of inventory and goods. And our technology arm, Y3 Technologies, we are able to track the data flow of this inventory and goods for our customers. So the last piece is on the financial flow that we are working with startups who are doing supply chain financing or cross-border payment solutions for our customers. And we think that the opportunity here is huge. Say, for example, YCH Group, we are, the annual inventory throughput is more than 60 billion. And if we can just capture a small percentage of this annual inventory throughput for supply chain financing or cross-border payment, we will be able to generate quite sizable additional revenue stream for the entire group.
I understand you have you're also looking to invest in areas called urbanization of logistics, and very interesting here, and also 3D printing where products can be virtually warehoused. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so on the first part, we have invested in companies such as Holio last year. So Holio is a container-based haulage startup that does on-demand haulage services. So think of them like Uber, but for trucking services. And for this kind of startup, we really, work very closely with them. So initially, when they first started in Singapore, we are able to give them the required volume for them to grow. Then And of course, we do have presence across Southeast Asia, China, and India. And for them to enter into new market, our local team will be able to, help them scale as well, in the various region. Yeah, so this is how we kind of value add, to this startup and how we integrate with their business.
If you're just tuning in, we're now speaking to Isaac Chua, Head of Investment at Supply Chain Angels and Head of Corporate Investment at YCH Group. Well, Isaac, speaking of the value creation, I just want to find out what is the incubation process like for the startups that are on board? And also, could you share some examples of the startups you have invested in over the 3 years apart from Hollywood as well?
Yeah, so for us, we don't really incubate companies that much, companies that do not have a ready product. And like I mentioned earlier, we do mostly Series A and pre-Series A company. That means these companies already have a very viable business model and profit-making strategy. So when we look at this kind of startup, we typically go into a proof of concept. So we provide them with the business for their revenue traction. And under the YCH Enlarged Group, we also have resources that these startups can tap on, like the co-working space that we have at Supply Chain City, for this startup to work with our technology arm, Y3 Technologies as well, with more than 300 over software developers to co-develop new technologies. And at the same time, we also run Supply Chain and Logistic Academy, in short called SCALA, that provides industry-led and workplace learning experience to build capabilities and develop talents in the logistic industry. And this entity is also a program partner of Workforce Singapore, WSG, and Scala actually prepares them for the talent who are keen to pursue a career in this industry. So this is how we kind of do a value creation with this startup that we invest in.
So, startups, they go into YCH, they had some value creation over there. What is the eventual, or what are the eventual goals for the startups you invest in? Is there any particular hurdle rate or ROI you're looking at, or do you intend to just merge them into part of the bigger YCH business?
So other than collaborating with startups on the use of their solutions and providing them with the resources, mentorship for them to grow, the eventual goal is mainly, to see some of these startups succeed so that investor like Supply Chain Angels can generate the kind of desired returns. And investing in startup companies is a very risky business, but it can be rewarding as well if and when the investments do pay off. So based on statistics, the majority of these new companies or products simply do not make it. So the risk of actually losing the entire investment is a real possibility. But the one that do make it, hopefully they can produce very high returns on our investment. And when we talk about ROI, unlike the real estate investments that my team also does at YCH Group, we don't really have a fixed hurdle rate or ROI when it comes to startup investment. And the second part to the question, under the bigger YCH Group, outside Supply Chain Angels, we do have investment that we take controlling stake as well. And most of the startups that we invest under SCAngels, we typically take no more than 20% stake in a company. And if the right opportunity comes along, we may consider acquiring this portfolio on a 100% basis and for them to be merged under the bigger YCH Group. However, as for now, most of this investment under Supply Chain Angels remains as a separate spin-off. Yeah.
I see. And well, Isaac, could you share with us some examples of the companies that remain as spin-off for now, and also the importance of corporate venturing to the wider YCH group?
So the few companies that we have in our portfolio, companies like, Tukitaki, which is an industry-leading cloud-based fraud detection AML company. So for this company, they provide mostly the software, enterprise software for the financial industry. So in this area, there is not much synergy to YCH Group. So for that kind of investment, we rather that they remain as a separate entity. And some of the newer companies that we invest in, like Holio, Liquid Group, that is doing cross-border payment. So these companies, we just did the investment last year and earlier this year. So we are still monitoring them, and now they still remain as a separate spin-off as well. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Isaac. That was Isaac Chua, Head of Investment at Supply Chain Angels and Head of Corporate Investment at YCH Group. Thank you very much for joining us on Money FM 89.3.
Money FM 89.3.